Hey folks, Chris Waters here, and by now you've heard the news. BJ Blazkowicz is back. There's a new Wolfenstein game in the works from a Swedish studio called Machine Games. Yes, that little dude who was grimacing at the status bar that 2 decades ago in that landmark shooter, he's bound for current and next-gen platforms in Wolfenstein: The New Order. A few weeks ago, I got to travel to Sweden, and I got to meet with the guys at Machine Games, and I got to play about 20 minutes of The New Order, and it was pretty cool. Unfortunately, I can't show you that gameplay, but I can tell you about it, tell you what the demo was like, what my experiences were like, and then you'll hear from the developers as well about big guns and speedy movement, cool alternate history setting, moon cursings, and fighting giant robo-dogs. What 20 years in an insane asylum does to a man after he faces off with minigun-wielding Robo-Hitler. You psyched? Get psyched. It all starts off at Machine Games, a studio founded by a group of guys who've been working together for over a decade. During their time at Starbreeze Studios, they worked on games like The Chronicles of Riddick and The Darkness, honing their skills at building story-driven first-person shooters. After striking out on their own to form Machine Games, they set their sights on one of the biggest names in gaming history, Wolfenstein.
We've taken the story in a sort of brave new direction, and we've altered the timeline, so rather than being in regular World War II setting, you're now in this alternate history of the world in the 1960s. And the Nazis have won the war and taken over the world.
We looked at the core of what we thought Wolfenstein is, and the super intensive, fast-paced combat is part of that, very much so. Yeah. But I also think that you have the adventure part was actually part of the original Wolfenstein 3D.
We worked a lot with trying to maintain the legacy of the IP, but we're most inspired, I would say, by the original Wolf 3D because it was such a milestone for us personally.
We've put a lot of effort into balancing both the action segments of the game with the parts that are more adventure-like, where you get to explore the world, you get to interact with friendly characters who meet, and sort of find the hidden truths about the world and secrets.
It's very much in our wheelhouse, and we were extremely happy when we got to work with this IP because so many things are like custom made for us, and one of them is powerful weapons.
Given the nature of gameplay demos, my time with the game was more action than adventure. After a fellow resistance fighter drove me in and got me into this giant Nazi research facility, monument, museum thing that was parked right next to Big Ben, I ended up fighting my way through 2 pretty spacious rooms full of Nazis. Multi-level spaces, lots of opportunities for running around, gunning, and it really felt like they were aiming for this nice balance between 2 sensations. The one being, I'm the most badass dude in here and I'm just gonna kill all of you, and the other being, oh crap, there's a lot of dudes here, if I don't get behind some cover, I'm gonna die. The guns in Wolfenstein: The New Order are feeling brash and heavy and like industrial, sort of an extrapolation of, you know, heavy steel work, that kind of industry feel. And they're really satisfying to shoot. You can also dual wield, like all of them. Then I got these shotguns, which literally, they're like these big boxy things that look like they could actually manufacture the bullets and then fire the bullets. And here I am holding 2 of them, just pop, 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 pop.
But then you have the retro sci-fi weapons, like the 60s sci-fi version of weaponry, like the laser minigun or the laser turret.
That turret that you can rip off and then just like tear everything to pieces, and pillars are blowing up and like cover is just getting destroyed, and all of a sudden those big mech robots that you saw in the trailer are not so formidable.
But that's also why we love a world that allows you to do that stuff. Because if you're doing like a war shooter or whatever, you're not gonna run around dual wielding rocket launchers or whatever, but we can do that because we're we're free to do whatever cool shit we want to do, you know?
So the place I was wielding all these guns in, the first big hall was sort of like an entrance hall. You know, you come in, there's balconies on either side and sort of stairwells and routes to kind of run around. Then the second room was this giant dome that had a scale model of the moon in it, because in Wolfenstein: The New Order, the Nazis were the first ones to make it to the moon, a fact that BJ actually finds out in the welcome hall. Much to his dismay, he sees a picture of a Nazi on the moon and is like, curses at the moon. It's kind of amusing. Movement is a pretty key part of what made the combat feel pretty lively and invigorating. You know, you can sprint between stuff, and there's no cover mechanic, though you do duck behind cover, and that's a pretty essential part of staying alive. You can also slide, like a sprint into a duck.
A Wolfenstein game is a game about movement to some degree. You know, you have to move. You can't just sit behind cover and kill all the enemies and wait for your health to regen. You have to move. You have to be active, and you have to take down the enemy. So sliding is something you're going to do. You're going to run, and you're just going to slide under cover and then continue. You know, but it's also about something that's very important to machine games, is to create environments that you feel like you're in, like very immersive environments, and like the body and being in that space is important. So how you move, how the animations work, and how you slide, for example, making that feel really real is important to us. And
then you can also lean to the side around stuff, and I was told lean under cars and like blast some dude's ankles out like you see in the movies, and you're always like, why don't people do that more? This makes a lot of sense. No one wears ankle armor. In addition to the normal guards, you've got the ones that are like in these sort of armored exo frames that seem to pack a little bit more of a punch, have a little bit more defense. And then you just go straight up into the robots. Like, you got flying drones coming at you. You've got this dog-like one that looks vaguely like a xenomorph from Aliens. And then the big hulking mechs you saw teased in the trailer, those guys are tough.
We're in the 60s, so we have this kind of retro sci-fi theme that we're applying to our enemies.
And so that gives us the freedom to have all kinds of Nazi sci-fi gear. Everything is sort of on the table. Like, we can have Nazi robots.
Do you have a favorite Nazi robot?
Every time there's a Nazi robot, it's my favorite.
So I ended up having a pretty great time with the actual combat, but there was a lot more to the demo to sort of absorb, and part of that is the alternate history setting, which I want to talk about for a sec. It's really cool. 20 years ahead of, you know, the Nazis' victory in World War II, they now have this stranglehold on Europe and the rest of the world, and, you know, installations next to major European landmarks and stuff, so there's all this neat visual imagery. It was fueled by some kind of technological leap, and Machine Games was a little coy about what exactly that was. It certainly doesn't seem to be as supernatural in nature as, say, Wolfenstein 2009, which was parallel universe, magical abilities, amulet stuff. But it certainly enables stuff like laser guns, like those giant mech dudes, and you know, industrial military hardware on a scale that they can just really be very imaginative in coming up with.
Just that sentence, the Nazis took over the world, you know, that's just so many things that we can create and work with and expand on. So I've never really felt like we're limited.
Both you and BJ are thrown into this world, which you have no really reference point to, except what the world was like before. And I think it's a really startling experience to see how the world has changed. And you discover this at the same time as BJ's. I think also makes you empathize with what BJ, what his experience is.
We call it a story-driven first-person action adventure. So you have the adventure part, and the adventure part will take you all over the world, and you're going to have exploration of these different locations. You're going to search for secrets, you're going to solve some puzzles, you're going to interact with characters, and you're going to flee by car through the Polish mountains. You're going to explore the Berlin catacombs in an underwater vehicle and control mech-like war machines and stuff like that. So we have a lot of different things that we try to do, but that's part of the adventuring aspects. And we have these story moments where you interact with characters and get to know them and cooperate with them.
I played out a scene where BJ is getting coffee in a train car. Him and Anya are trying to infiltrate Berlin, and while he's going back to the room, this Nazi officer beckons him over to her table. She's sitting there with her boy toy named Booby, and she and Booby start talking to you, and they seem kind of lighthearted. They're very flirtatious with each other, but there's also this undercurrent of no, sit down. We need to have a talk. This is a check. So the Frau says, come and sit at my table for a second. Let's see if you're a true Aryan. Smiling haha, won't it be a fun game? But that's also kind of terrifying because the consequences if she judges you wanting are very clear from the fact that she's put her pistol on the table, and in the corner of the train car is one of those hulking mech robots. She starts flipping cards. It's postcards of just random pictures, and I'm choosing which one I gravitate towards. It's this weird psych test that's happening, and she occasionally looks at me like, your choice is important, but then is also really lewdly flirting with Booby, who's sitting right next to her. And they're making jokes, and it's all very funny. And I'm unsettled. It was very odd. And at the end, she just goes, ha ha ha, it was all a joke. Go ahead, you're fine. And I walk away. But it was uneasy and made me feel oh, okay, that was a situation in which I was powerless. And that was also a situation in which there was a weird villain. And there's apparently more of them in store.
If your enemy is strong and powerful and a worthy adversary, for some people that sort of reflects badly on the hero, they think that makes the hero weaker, but it's so not the case. You want that Goliath to face,
Yeah.
So we work a lot with building up the opposition, so you're invested emotionally in taking them down.
Now, between combat and world building and characters, we've been focusing a lot on the single-player component of Wolfenstein: The New Order. There's a good reason for that. Wolfenstein: The New Order is single-player only. There is no multiplayer component. But remember, the Machine Games guys all cut their teeth on Riddick and the Darkness and these sort of story-driven shooter experiences. And so I'm optimistic that this one's going to turn out well. Certainly the combat was fun, that balance between being a badass and being vulnerable that creates that urgency. And the world is really intriguing.
It's such a huge part of video game legacy. If there's a video game museum, Wolfenstein is in the first room, because it's the start of the wave that changed the world of gaming,
Yeah.
On a personal level, I played this when I was younger, and it was mind-blowing, and I never then, of course, dreamed that I would ever be working with it, but it's both an honor and a legacy. It's in many ways a dream come true to make a Wolfenstein game.
I think it's looking pretty cool, and I'm interested what you guys think. Let us know in the comments below, and chime in on your Wolfenstein memories. What are you hoping for from this experience, given the history of this franchise? And then stay tuned to GameSpot for more on Wolfenstein: The New Order in the coming weeks and months. Thanks for watching.
They forgot about me.
Said a joker to the thief.